What is this place?
This is Veileros, child, the last kingdom of the dragonlords. And you are the first soul from across the Sunset Sea to set foot on our shores in over 400 years.
What if the Starks ruled with fear, like the old kings of winter? Part 4. Let's explore this alternate timeline together in the video. These are the stories from the Citadel. You've never seen Westeros like this before. Subscribe if you want to join us on our journey. The years after the Second Conquest are quiet ones. The realm bends. The lords pay tribute. The faith preaches obedience. The name Hightower is not spoken aloud in any court from the Wall to Dorne. Ned Stark sits in Winterfell and watches his grandchildren play in the courtyard. And for a time, it seems as though the old wolf might actually find peace in his final years. But Ned Stark has never been a man who rests. Even now, with his beard white and his hands shaking when he grips the arms of his chair, his mind is working. It is always working. And in the last months of his life, his mind turns to the one question that no Stark has ever answered. What lies west of Westeros? The maps end at the Sunset Sea. Every maester in the Citadel, every captain in the Manderley fleet, every sailor who has ever crewed a ship out of Lannisport or Old Town will tell you the same thing. The sea goes on forever. There is nothing out there but water and wind and death. But Ned does not believe that. He has read the old chronicles, the ones his men took from the Citadel during the sack of Old Town. And in those ancient texts, he has found references that trouble him. Valyrian records that speak of expeditions west, ships that sailed beyond the horizon and never returned. And one account, written in High Valyrian so old that even the maesters struggled to translate it, that speaks of a dragonlord family that did not flee east to Dragonstone. The entry is fragmentary. It names no house. It gives no destination. It simply says that the eldest of the 40 families saw the fire coming before any other and chose a path that none would follow. They took their dragons, their scrolls, their blood, and they flew into the setting sun. The account ends with a single line that Ned has read 100 times. They did not fall. They simply vanished from the world we knew. Ned sits with this knowledge for weeks. He tells no one. He reads the passage again and again, running his fingers over the ancient Valyrian script, and he thinks about what it would mean if it were true. A dragonlord family, older and more powerful than the Targaryens, surviving somewhere beyond the edge of every map. A civilization built on Valyrian blood and Valyrian fire, growing in the dark while Westeros tore itself apart over a chair made of swords. He knows he will not live to find out. His body is failing. The cold that never used to bother him now settles in his bones like a second skeleton. And some mornings it takes him 20 minutes to rise from his bed. But he has one child left who was built for this. One child who has never been content with walls and borders and the edges of maps. One child who has spent her entire life running toward the unknown. He sends for Arya. She arrives at Winterfell on a grey afternoon in late autumn, riding through the gates on a dark horse, with Nymeria loping beside her. The direwolf is enormous now, larger than any wolf in the north, her golden eyes scanning the courtyard with the quiet menace of an apex predator who knows she has no equal. Arya dismounts and walks into the great hall where Ned is waiting. She has not been home in over a year. She has been traveling the Riverlands, the Stormlands, the coast of Dorne, moving from place to place the way she always does, never settling, never stopping, always looking for something she cannot name. When she sees her father, she stops. He is thinner than she remembers. His hands tremble when he lifts them from the arms of his chair. But his eyes are the same, grey and cold and sharp as the edge of a blade, and when they fix on her, she feels the familiar weight of his attention, the pressure of being seen by a man who sees everything.
You look well.
You look old.
I am old.
He unfolds the ancient scroll on the table between them. The Valyrian script is faded, the parchment cracked and brittle, but the words are still legible. Arya reads them slowly, her lips moving as she sounds out the High Valyrian that Ned insisted all his children learn after they united their house with the Targaryens.
This says a dragonlord family flew west before the doom, not to Dragonstone, west, into the Sunset Sea.
It does.
And you believe it?
I believe the Valyrians were not fools. They mapped the world more thoroughly than any civilization before or since. If one of their families chose to fly west, they had a reason. They knew something was out there, something worth the risk.
Why are you showing me this?
Because I want you to find them.
The silence that follows is not the uncomfortable kind. It is the silence of two people who understand each other perfectly, who have always understood each other, who have never needed to explain the things that matter most. Arya looks at the scroll. She looks at her father, and she sees what he is not saying. This is not an order. This is a gift, the last gift he will ever give her.
You have spent your entire life searching for something, Arya. You have crossed every border in Westeros. You have killed men in their beds and saved the world in a godswood and sailed to Braavos and back. But you have never found the thing you are looking for, because the thing you are looking for is not in Westeros. It never was. The maps end at the Sunset Sea. I want you to find out what comes after.
And if there is nothing out there, if it is just water and wind and death, like the maesters say,
then you will be the first Stark to prove it. But I do not think there is nothing. I think there is something out there that the world has forgotten, and I think you are the only person alive who can find it. You are not like your brothers and sisters, Arya. You were never meant to rule or to build or to hold. You were meant to move. You were meant to discover. That is your gift. I have spent my entire life trying to keep this family alive. Let me spend my last days knowing that one of my children is doing something more than surviving. Let me know that you are living.
Arya's eyes burn. She does not cry. She has not cried since the long night. But she takes her father's hand and holds it for a long time. And when she speaks, her voice is steady.
I will need ships, good ones, and a crew that does not frighten easily.
You will have Manderley's finest. 3 ships, provisioned for a year. Gendry will go with you. He has been asking after you for months, and he is the best smith in the 7 kingdoms. You will need him if you find what I think you will find. And take Nymeria. A wolf should always have her pack.
Arya nods. She folds the scroll carefully and tucks it into her belt. Then she leans forward and kisses her father on the forehead, the way he used to kiss her when she was small. She does not say goodbye. She does not need to. They both know this is the last time they will see each other. Ned watches her walk out of the Great Hall. He watches until the door closes behind her and the sound of her boots fades into silence. Then he closes his eyes and lets out a breath that he has been holding for 30 years. The last of his weapons has been launched. The last of his children has been set free. Whatever comes next is beyond his control, and for the first time in Rickard Stark's life, he is at peace with that. He dies 3 weeks later, in his sleep, in the bed he shared with Catelyn. Robb finds him in the morning with Ghost curled at his feet, the old direwolf's red eyes open and watching, as if guarding his master even in death. The North mourns as it has never mourned before, not with wailing or weeping, but with silence. A silence that spreads from Winterfell to the wall, and from the wall to the neck. A silence so deep and so vast that small folk in Winterstown say the old gods themselves have gone quiet. But Arya does not hear any of it. By the time her father dies, she is already 3 weeks out from White Harbor, sailing west into the Sunset Sea on a ship called the Winter Wolf. Gendry stands at the rail beside her, his arms folded across his chest, his dark hair whipping in the salt wind. Behind them, 2 more ships follow in formation, their Manderley crews seasoned and steady. Nymeria paces the deck, her great golden eyes fixed on the western horizon as though she can see something no one else can. For the first 2 weeks, the voyage is uneventful. They follow the currents that the Manderley captains know, riding the western drift that pushes past the Iron Islands and out into open water. The seas are calm, the skies are clear. Gendry spends his days at the small forge he has built in the ship's hold, hammering out tools and nails and whatever else the crew needs. He has brought his finest work with him, a set of dragonglass weapons and a warhammer forged from Valyrian steel that Robert Baratheon himself would have envied. At night, he sits with Arya on the forecastle and watches the stars wheel overhead. The crew is nervous. They have sailed farther west than any Manderley ship has ever gone, and some of the older sailors mutter about sea dragons and the edge of the world. But Arya walks among them every morning and every evening, and her presence steadies them. There is something about a woman who killed the Night King that makes ordinary fears seem very small.
Your father really believed there was something out here.
He did.
And what do you believe?
I believe the Valyrians did not fly into nothing. They were the greatest civilization the world has ever known. They mapped the stars. They tamed dragons. They built roads that still stand 400 years after they died. If one of their families flew west, they found something. The question is what?
And if we do not find anything? If we just sail until the food runs out and the water goes bad, and we have to turn back?
Then we turn back, but I do not think we will.
Why not?
Because my father would not have sent me on a fool's errand. He spent his entire life calculating every move before he made it. He would not have sent his daughter into the Sunset Sea unless he was certain something was out there. He may be dying, but his mind is sharper than ever. He saw something in those scrolls that made him sure.
Gendry is quiet for a moment. Then he looks at her the way he has always looked at her, with a steady warmth that asks nothing and offers everything.
You know, he also sent me with you. Your father could have sent any smith. He sent the one he knew would follow you to the edge of the world and beyond.
I know why he sent you, Gendry.
Do you?
Because you are stubborn enough to keep up with me and stupid enough to try.
Gendry laughs. It is the first real laugh anyone on the ship has heard in days, and it carries across the water like a bell. Even Nymeria lifts her head and looks at him with something that might be approval. Sponsored by theblackdread.com. You can use the site for free, but for $1.99 a month, you get exclusive shorts and member perks, less than a gas station snack. Jump in at theblackdread.com. By the fourth week, the signs become impossible to ignore. The water shifts from dark gray to deep green, and the air carries scents that no one on the crew can identify. Strange birds, larger than any gull, circle the ships at dawn and vanish by midday. Schools of fish the size of horses surface alongside the hulls and then dive, as if guiding them forward. Arya stands at the prow and feels the current shifting beneath the hull, pulling them westward with a force that the sails alone could not explain.
The sea is changing. Can you feel it? The currents are stronger, the water is warmer. We are being pulled towards something.
Gendry joins her at the rail. He has salt in his hair and iron dust on his hands, and he squints into the western horizon as if he can will land into existence.
The crew is getting restless. We have been at sea for nearly a month. Some of the older men are talking about turning back.
We are not turning back. Not when we are this close.
Close to what?
I do not know yet, but I can feel it. The same way Nymeria can. Look at her.
The direwolf stands at the very tip of the prow, her massive body rigid, her golden eyes fixed on the western horizon. Her ears are pricked forward, her nostrils flare with every breath. She has been standing like this for 2 days, barely eating, barely sleeping, locked onto something beyond the edge of the visible world. And on the 29th day, a storm hits. It comes from the west, a wall of black cloud and driving rain that slams into the fleet like a fist. The Winter Wolf is thrown sideways. Her mast cracks. Her sails tear. The second ship, the Manderley's Pride, loses her rudder and begins to drift. The third ship vanishes entirely into the darkness, and Arya never sees her again. For 3 days, the storm batters them. Gendry works the pumps until his hands bleed. The crew bails water and ties down everything that moves. Nymeria howls from the hold, a sound that cuts through the wind like a blade. Arya stands at the helm and fights the wheel with every ounce of strength she has, refusing to let the sea take her ship. On the fourth morning, the storm breaks. The sun rises over water that is impossibly blue, bluer than anything Arya has ever seen. And in the distance, rising from the sea like the spine of a sleeping dragon, a coastline appears. Cliffs of dark stone, streaked with veins of something that glows faintly red in the morning light. Forests of trees so tall and black, they look like towers. And at the center of it all, perched on a promontory that juts out over the water like a clenched fist, a fortress of pale stone and dark iron that seems to grow out of the rock itself. Arya stares at it. Gendry comes to stand beside her, his face cut and bruised from the storm, his eyes wide.
What in seven hells is that?
That is what my father sent me to find.
They do not have time to make a proper landing. The Winter Wolf is taking on water, her hull cracked in 3 places from the storm, and the Manderly's pride is worse. Arya steers for a sheltered cove at the base of the cliffs, but the current catches them and drags them toward the rocks. The impact is brutal. The Winter Wolf's keel snaps against a submerged reef, and the ship rolls onto her side. Arya, Gendry, and a dozen surviving crewmen are thrown into the surf. Nymeria leaps from the deck and swims to the shore, her massive body cutting through the waves like a blade. They crawl onto a black sand beach, soaked and bleeding and exhausted, and they lie there gasping, while the remains of the Winter Wolf settle into the water behind them. When Arya lifts her head, she sees them, riders on the cliffs above, 6 of them, mounted on horses that are larger and darker than any breed she has seen in Westeros, their coats so black they seem to absorb the morning light. The riders wear armor of dark iron and pale steel, interlocked in patterns that Arya does not recognize, but that remind her of something she has seen before. Valyrian stonework, the spirals and curves of the freehold, the same patterns that decorate the walls of Dragonstone. But it is not the riders that make her breath catch. It is what flies above them. A dragon, not a small one, not a hatchling or a yearling or anything remotely manageable. A massive silver-scaled beast with wings that span the width of the cove, its eyes the color of molten gold, its breath steaming in the morning air as it circles above the riders in a lazy, predatory spiral. It is larger than Rhaegal. It might be larger than Drogon. The riders descend the cliff path in a single file. The lead rider dismounts and removes her helmet. She's tall, taller than Arya, with silver gold hair braided in a style that Arya has only seen in the oldest paintings of Valyria. Her eyes are violet, but not the pale violet of Daenerys. These are darker, deeper, the color of a bruise or a twilight sky. She is beautiful in the way that Valyrians are beautiful, with features so sharp and symmetrical they do not look entirely real. She studies Arya and her bedraggled crew with an expression that is not hostile, but is not welcoming either. It is the expression of a woman who is deciding whether the creatures before her are worth her attention. When she speaks, her voice carries the cadence of High Valyrian, but the words are the common tongue, accented and formal, as if she learned it from a book rather than from conversation.
You are from across the Sunset Sea.
I'm Arya Stark of Winterfell. My ship was wrecked in the storm. My crew needs help.
Stark? That is not a Valyrian name.
No, it is a northern name, a First Men name. We have ruled the north for 8,000 years.
8,000 years. That is a long time, even by our reckoning. I am Vaelara Veileros, High Sovereign of Veileros, Lady of the Dragonmount, and Keeper of the Freehold's memory. My house has ruled these lands for 412 years, since my ancestors crossed the Sunset Sea to escape the doom of Valyria. You are the first soul from your side of the world to reach our shores since the expedition we sent east 2 centuries ago.
You sent an expedition east?
We did. They did not return. We assumed the worst. We assumed the East had fallen into barbarism, as our records predicted it would. It seems we were not entirely wrong.
Arya opens her mouth to respond to that, but Gendry puts a hand on her arm. She bites back the words and nods.
We have a great deal to tell each other, Lady Veileros.
Indeed we do. But first, let us get your people out of the water. Veileros does not let its guests die on the shore.
The Valyrian riders move with practiced efficiency. They pull the surviving Manderley crew from the surf, tend to wounds, wrap bodies in dark cloth. Horses are brought down from the cliff, and Arya and her people are mounted behind the riders and led up a winding path carved into the stone. Nymeria follows on foot, and the Valyrian riders give the direwolf a wide berth, watching her with wary fascination. They have never seen a wolf this large. They have never seen a wolf at all, Arya realizes. There are no wolves on this continent. The path opens onto a plateau, and from there, Arya gets her first true view of Veileros, and it steals her breath. The land stretches west from the coast in a series of rolling hills and deep valleys, each one greener and more lush than the last. Rivers of clear water wind through forests of black-barked trees that tower the hundreds of feet into the air. In the distance, mountains rise, their peaks lost in clouds, and along their slopes Arya can see structures carved into the rock itself, towers and bridges and terraces that gleam white against the dark stone. But what dominates the landscape are the dragons. They are everywhere. Arya counts 7 in the sky above the fortress alone, circling and diving and playing in the thermals like enormous birds of prey. Their scales catch the sunlight and throw it back in colors she has never imagined. Silver, gold, deep crimson, a blue so dark it is almost black, and one, the largest, a pure white dragon with eyes like rubies that perches on the highest tower of the fortress and watches the world below with an ancient, knowing stillness.
How many dragons do you have?
23 at last count. More are hatching every decade. The volcanic chain to the west provides the heat they need, and we have never lost the knowledge of how to tend the eggs. The Targaryens, I understand, were not so fortunate.
The Targaryens lost their dragons for over a century. They only returned when Daenerys Targaryen hatched 3 from petrified eggs in a funeral pyre.
3 from petrified eggs in a funeral pyre.
She says this the way a master smith might react to hearing that someone forged a sword by hitting a rock with a stick. There is pity in it, and curiosity, and something else, something that might be amusement.
The Targaryens were always the least of the 40 families, minor lords with minor holdings and minor dragons. They survived the doom only because one of their women had a prophetic dream, and even then, they barely managed to save themselves. We Veileros did not rely on dreams. We had scholars, we had records. We had been tracking the volcanic instability beneath Valyria for 3 generations before the doom. When we left, we took everything, every scroll, every bloodline, every egg. We did not flee, Lady Stark. We evacuated.
They ride through the fortress gates, which are enormous, carved from the same dark stone as the cliffs and inlaid with patterns of dragon scale wrought in actual dragon scales, each one the size of a shield. The courtyard beyond is vast and immaculate, paved in white stone that has been polished to a mirror shine. Servants in dark robes move silently between buildings that blend Valyrian architecture with something Arya has never seen before, a style that is organic and flowing, as though the buildings were not constructed but grown from the earth. There is no mud, there is no hay, there are no chickens or pigs or dogs. Everything is clean and ordered and precise in a way that makes Arya's skin prickle. Vaelara leads them into a great hall that makes the throne room of the Red Keep look like a peasant's cottage. The ceiling is so high that Arya cannot see the top. The walls are lined with tapestries depicting scenes that she recognizes from Valyrian history. The wars against old geese, the taming of the first dragons, the building of the freehold. But there are also scenes she does not recognize. Battles fought on green plains beneath alien skies, cities rising from jungles, dragons flying in formations above fleets of ships. The history of a civilization that has been growing and fighting and building for 4 centuries on a continent that the rest of the world does not know exists.
Sit, eat. You have been at sea for a month, and you look like you need it. When you are rested, we will talk. I wish to hear everything about the world we left behind.
The food is extraordinary. Fruits and meats and wines that Arya cannot name, served on plates of black stone with utensils of pale Valyrian steel. Gendry eats cautiously, watching the servants with the eyes of a man who has spent his life in forges and battlefields and does not trust luxury. Nymeria refuses the food entirely and lies at Arya's feet, her golden eyes tracking every movement in the hall. When the meal is finished, Vaelara dismisses the servants and sits across from Arya. The 2 women study each other. They are roughly the same age, Arya realizes, though Vaelara carries herself with the gravity of a woman twice her years. The violet eyes are unreadable. The silver-gold hair catches the light from the hearth fire and seems to glow.
Now, tell me of Westeros. Tell me of the Targaryens. Tell me everything.
Arya speaks for 3 hours. She tells the story of the Targaryens, from Aegon the Conqueror to the Mad King. She tells the story of Robert's rebellion, of her father's rise, of the war for the Dorne and the Long Night, and the Second Conquest. She tells of Jon and Daenerys, and the dragons that were reborn. She tells of the Wall, the wildlings, the army of the dead, the Night King. When she reaches the part about the Battle of Winterfell and the Night King's destruction, Vaelara leans forward in her chair, her violet eyes wide.
The others. You fought the others.
You know of them?
We know of them. Our records speak of a great evil in the far north of Westeros, a force of ice and death that nearly consumed the world during the Long Night, 8,000 years ago. Our ancestors believed it was the reason the Children of the Forest created the Wall. We also believed it was defeated permanently. You are telling me it returned.
It returned, and I killed the Night King.
Vaelara stares at her. For the first time, the composure cracks. The High Sovereign of Veileros looks at the small, scarred, gray-eyed woman across from her with something that is not pity and is not condescension. It is recognition. One killer recognizing another.
You killed the Night King. You, personally.
With a Valyrian steel dagger through the back of the skull.
Then you have done something that no Veileros has ever done, Lady Stark. You have earned a place at my table for as long as you wish to stay.
Arya accepts with a nod, but she is not finished with her questions. And Vaelara, it seems, is not finished either. Over the next several evenings, the 2 women sit together in the great hall after the household has retired, sharing wine and stories the way their ancestors might have shared mead around a fire. Arya learns the full history of House Veileros, and each chapter is more extraordinary than the last.
We were the eldest of the 40 families. Not the wealthiest, not the most powerful in terms of dragons or soldiers. But we were the family that kept the records. Every other house focused on war, on expansion, on breeding bigger and fiercer dragons. We focused on knowledge. We had the largest library in the freehold, larger even than the archives of Volantis. Our scholars mapped the volcanic network beneath Valyria 3 generations before the Doom, and they predicted it to within a decade of when it happened.
The Targaryens had Daenerys the Dreamer. She had a vision.
Yes, we know of Daenerys. A single dream. One girl who saw fire in her sleep and convinced her father to flee. We did not rely on dreams, Lady Stark. We relied on measurement, on observation, on 100 years of seismic readings recorded in stone tablets that we still possess. When the volcanoes began to shift and the hot springs around Valyria started to boil, Our scholars calculated that the entire peninsula would erupt within 20 years. They were wrong by only 3.
And you chose to go west instead of east.
We chose west because east was already dying. The free cities were Valyrian colonies, yes, but they were also parasites feeding on the freehold's power. Without Valyria, they would collapse into civil war, which, I understand from your account, is exactly what happened. Dragonstone was a rock in the sea, barely large enough to support a single family. We wanted more. Our scholars had studied the currents of the Sunset Sea. They believed a large landmass existed to the west, based on the migration patterns of certain seabirds and the chemical composition of driftwood that washed up on Valeria's western shores. They were right.
And the people who were already here?
Vaelara pauses. It is a brief pause, barely noticeable, but Arya catches it. She has been trained to catch pauses.
The native peoples of this continent were numerous but divided. Hundreds of tribes and petty kingdoms, many of them at war with one another. Some welcomed us, others did not. We fought when we had to. We traded when we could. Over time, we established order. The dragons helped, of course. There is nothing quite like a dragon to settle a territorial dispute.
She smiles when she says this. It is a warm smile, the smile of a woman sharing a fond memory. But Arya notices that the smile does not reach her eyes. Arya shares the history of Westeros in return. In the days that follow, Arya and Gendry are given chambers in the fortress. They are enormous, carved from pale stone, with windows that overlook the valley below. The view is staggering. From her window, Arya can see 3 dragons sleeping on the ridgeline, their scales catching the sunset like coins scattered on a dark cloth. Below them, the valley is dotted with farms and villages, and the people moving through them look healthy and well-fed and content. It all looks perfect. That is what unsettles her. Gendry notices it too. He sits on the edge of the bed and looks at his hands, the calloused hands of a blacksmith, and he speaks quietly.
Something is wrong here.
You feel it too.
It is too clean, too ordered. The servants do not speak. They do not look at us. They do not look at each other. They move like, I do not know, like they have been trained to move that way. Not like people, like tools.
I noticed. And the small folk in the villages. Did you see their faces when the dragon passed overhead? They did not look up, not once. In Westeros, when a dragon flies over a village, every man, woman, and child stops what they are doing and stares. Here, they did not even flinch. That is not awe. That is something else.
Fear.
No. Fear makes people flinch. These people did not flinch at all. They have been trained not to react. And training like that does not come from peace. It comes from something that looks like peace, but is not.
She does not share this with Vaelara. Not yet. She has been trained by the most ruthless man in Westeros to gather information before acting, to watch before speaking, to count the knives in the room before sitting down. And so she watches. She explores the fortress in the early mornings when the halls are empty. She walks the grounds with Nymeria at her side, the direwolf's hackles occasionally rising for no reason Arya can see. She studies the tapestries more closely and notices something she missed at first. In the oldest scenes, the ones depicting the early years of Veileros, the people in the backgrounds have chains on their wrists. Vaelara gives her access to the Veiler's archives, a library that dwarfs even the collection Ned took from the Citadel. The scrolls are organized by century, and they tell the story of House Veileros with a thoroughness that would make any Maester weep with envy. The family's history unfolds across 400 years, like a novel written in blood and fire. The first landing, when Veileros brought 7 dragons and 300 followers to the western continent. The Wars of the Green Shore, when they fought the native peoples of the coast for a generation before conquering the entire seaboard. The founding of the Dragon Mount, the fortress where Arya now sleeps, built on a volcanic hot spring that keeps the dragon eggs warm. The flowering, a century of expansion and prosperity during which the Valyrians pushed inland, built cities, established trade routes with peoples deeper in the continent, and bred their dragon stock from 7 to over 30. The Taming, a period that the records describe with clinical precision, during which the native populations were, in the words of the archive, integrated into the freehold structure. Arya reads that phrase 3 times, integrated into the freehold structure. She knows what that means. She has read enough Valyrian history to recognize the language. The Valyrians did not use the word slave. They used the word thrall, or bondswoman, or integrated worker. But the meaning was always the same. She thinks of the mines beneath old Valyria, where 1 million slaves worked the volcanic stone until they died. She thinks of the stories Tyrion told about the road to Meereen, lined with crucified slaves pointing the way. She thinks of the fighting pits of Astapor and the Unsullied, boys who had their names and their identities stripped from them, integrated into the freehold's structure. There it is, hidden in plain sight. She reads deeper. The more recent records are more guarded, more careful with their language. They speak of the sovereign's peace, a period of stability that has lasted for the past 2 centuries. They speak of the dragon patrols that keep the peace across the continent. They speak of the tribute system that funds the Dragon Mount and its operations. They speak of the strict caste system that organizes society into families, trades and services, each one answering to the Valyrians and their dragons. There is an entire section devoted to the caste of hands, the lowest tier, workers who are born into their labor and cannot leave it. Their children inherit their position. Their marriages are approved by the Dragon Mount. They are fed and housed and clothed and protected. And in return, they work. They work until they die, and their children work after them. None of it uses the word slavery, but the architecture of it is unmistakable to a woman who grew up in a world built on the same foundations. The silence of the servants, the stillness of the small folk when the dragons pass, the perfection of the streets and the cleanliness of the courtyard, and the absolute, total absence of disorder in every aspect of Veileros life. This is not peace. This is control. And it is enforced by 23 dragons and 4 centuries of unchallenged power. Gendry finds her in the archive on the 5th night. She has been reading for hours, the scrolls spread around her in a semicircle, her eyes red from the strain of translating High Valyrian by candlelight. He sits beside her and looks at what she's been reading.
What did you find?
Exactly what my father would have expected. A kingdom that looks like paradise from the outside and runs on the backs of people who have no choice. The Valyrians did not escape the sins of old Valyria, Gendry. They brought them west. They refined them. They made them beautiful. But underneath the silk and the wine and the clean white stone, this is a slave empire. It has been one for 400 years.
Does Vaelara know that you know?
No, and she will not know until I am ready. My father taught me to count the knives before sitting down. I have not finished counting.
On her 7th night in Veileros, Arya lies in her bed and stares at the ceiling. Nymeria sleeps beside her, the dire wolf's warmth a comfort in a place that has every luxury and no warmth at all. She thinks of her father. She thinks of his last words to her, "Let me know that you are living." She thinks of Winterfell, of the cold grey walls and the hot springs and the sound of swords in the courtyard. She thinks of what her father built, a kingdom held together by fear, and she wonders whether he would recognize what she has found. A kingdom held together by the same thing, but older and more refined and far, far more dangerous. She does not sleep. Instead, she rises and walks barefoot through the silent corridors of the Dragon Mount. Nymeria pads behind her, soundless. The halls are dark and empty, lit only by the faint red glow of the volcanic vents beneath the fortress. She walks deeper than she has gone before, past the guest chambers, past the archives, past the great hall, into a section of the fortress that she has not been invited to enter. At the end of a long corridor, she finds a door. It is locked. It is the first locked door she has encountered in the Dragon Mount. Everything else has been open, inviting, presented to her with the warm generosity of a host who wants her guest to feel welcome. But this door is locked, and behind it, she hears something. It is faint, muffled by the stone, but unmistakable. Screaming. Arya presses her hand against the door and closes her eyes. Nymeria's hackles rise. The dire wolf's lips pull back from her teeth in a silent snarl, and her golden eyes fix on the door with an intensity that makes the air around her feel colder. Arya does not open the door. Not tonight. She is her father's daughter, and her father taught her to watch before acting, to count the knives before sitting down, to never move until she knows exactly where every threat in the room is hiding. She turns away from the door and walks back to her chambers, her bare feet silent on the cold stone. When she reaches her room, Gendry is awake. He is sitting in the dark, his war hammer across his knees, and he looks at her with the quiet alertness of a man who has learned to sleep light in dangerous places.
Where did you go?
I found a locked door, the only locked door in this entire fortress, and behind it, someone is screaming.
Gendry's jaw tightens. He grips the warhammer and starts to rise, but Arya shakes her head.
Not yet. We are guests in a kingdom with 23 dragons and an army we have not even seen the full extent of. We are 13 people and a direwolf. If we act before we understand what we are dealing with, we die. And worse than that, we die without anyone in Westeros ever knowing what we found.
So what do we do?
We do what my father would do. We watch. We learn. We count every knife in this fortress, and when we know enough, we decide. But not tonight.
She lies down beside Nymeria and closes her eyes. The dire wolf presses against her, warm and solid and real, in a place that feels increasingly unreal. Through the stone walls, miles away and muffled by the weight of a mountain, she can still hear the screaming. It is faint. It might be her imagination. But Arya Stark was trained by the most dangerous family in Westeros, and she knows the difference between imagination and truth. She does not forget. A Stark never forgets. And Arya Stark, the girl who killed the Night King, the wolf who sailed beyond the edge of every map, is beginning to understand that the world she has found is not the paradise it presents itself to be. It is something else entirely, something that would have made even Ned Stark pause. Her father built a kingdom on fear and called it safety. The Valyrians built a kingdom on silence and called it peace. The difference between the two is the locked door at the end of the corridor and what lives behind it. She is going to find out what it is, and when she does, she is going to decide what the daughter of Ned Stark does about it. But that is a story for another day. That's my view of this alternate timeline. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and endless possibilities, and we are here to uncover them with you. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.